Shalom everyone, and thank you for joining me in the study of Parashat Miketz. In Parashat Miketz, we learn about Yosef's rise to power, from being in prison to be the second in command in Egypt. And Yosef, in a way, is being described in this parasha as a person who is torn between two universes, two worlds, two places, two domains. And what do I mean by that? The Torah states, וישלח פרעה ויקרא את יוסף ויריצו מן הבור ויגלח ויחלף שמלותיו ויבוא אל פרעה. Pharaoh sent because he heard that Yosef is someone who can interpret his dreams. So in a very fast pace, he brought him back from prison, and Yosef bathed, clothed himself, and stood in front of Paro. ויאמר פרעה אל יוסף, so Paro says to Yosef, חלום חלמתי, I dreamt a dream. ופותר אין אותו. No one can really give me an interpretation that will make sense to me. Our sages, by the way, said that many people tried, but it didn't talk to Paro. Paro knew that there is something deeper than that. ואני שמעתי עליך, and I heard about you from the butler, לאמור, תשמע חלום, לפתור אותו. You hear a dream and you know how to interpret it. So, we all know the story. Paro shares with Yosef his dreams, and Yosef gives him the right interpretation. 7 years of plenty, and then 7 years of famine. And not only that I'm giving you the interpretation, says Yosef to Pharaoh, but I also give you a solution. And not only a solution, I'm willing to take care of it and basically put myself in the middle of it. In the 7 years of plenty, my suggestion to you, says Yosef to Pharaoh, is to accumulate as much wealth, as much wheat and barley and fruits and vegetables, whatever we can put our hands on, so we will be ready for the 7 years of famine. And definitely Yosef is willing to not only give an interpretation to a dream, not only to give a suggestion of what to do, he's willing to be responsible for it. So, Paro, after he listened to everything that Yosef says, told his servants, ויאמר פרעה אל עבדיו. So Paro said to his servants, הנמצא כזה איש אשר רוח אלוקים בו. Can we find anyone like this person? Like this guy who really came from prison? He was a slave. We don't know exactly anything about him, but you know what? The guy is brilliant. He is a genius. And therefore, ish asher ruach elokim bo. He has a spirit of God. Even Paro was able to detect that there is something special with that person. ויאמר פרעה אל יוסף, אחרי הודיע אלוקים אותך את כל זאת, אין נבון וחכם כמוך. Paro says to Yosef, it seems to be that God is with you, and God really revealed to you what will happen here. There is no one who is smarter or wiser than you. אתה תהיה על ביתי, you're going to be appointed to be the manager of my house, of my palace, of my kingdom. ועל פיך יישק כל עמי, everything you says goes. רק הכיסא יגדל ממך. Just, you need to know, you're not the king. You are second in command. ויאמר פרעה אל יוסף, ראה נתתי אותך על כל ארץ מצרים. See, I appointed you to oversee all Egypt. Let's pause here for just a second, just for the drama itself. You have a person who was in prison. You had someone who was a slave before, was sold as a slave, went to prison. Now he is being presented with the opportunity, and not really the opportunity, it's the appointment, of being second in command. And Paro is so excited, he's thrilled with finding this boy. ויסר פרעה את טבעתו מעל ידו, and Paro removed his ring from his finger, ויתן אותה על יד יוסף, and he put it on Joseph's hands. Very similar to Achashverosh and Haman in the Purim story. וילבש אותו בגדי שש, וישם רביד הזהב על צווארו. So Paro, in order to glorify Yosef, and in order to show everyone that now he is part of the royal family, so he dresses him with king's clothes, and he puts, I guess, some kind of a golden scarf on him to show to everyone that he has the signia of the royal family. וירכב אותו במרכבת המשנה אשר לו. And then he puts him in his wagon. ויקראו לפניו אברך ונתון אותו על כל ארץ מצרים. And everyone recognizes Joseph's greatness. Until now, we see that Joseph is going through a dramatic transformation. Again, from being a slave, being a prisoner, now he's second in command, and it all in matters of few years. ויאמר פרעה אל יוסף, אני פרעה. So Paro says to Joseph, I'm Paro. ובלעדיך לא ירים איש את ידו ואת רגלו בכל ארץ מצרים. Full control. Without you, no one in Egypt can move. And now, we are getting to the point, or to the junction. Until now, we all understand what's going on here. Paro understands that Joseph is very smart, he's wise, he can trust him. However, there is a problem. Yosef has no lineage to any Egyptian family. He has a Hebrew name. He himself says, I was stolen from the Hebrew land, from the land of Canaan, from the land of Israel. And he's a foreigner. So we have a problem with him appointing him to now run the country. He is not part of us. So what do we do? And here is the junction of what I will call the junction of identity. ויקרא פרעה שם יוסף צופנת פענח. So Paro names Yosef צופנת פענח. Now just the translation, צופנת comes from the word צפון, which means hidden. And פענח is to resolve it, meaning to find the things that are hidden, which means Yosef was able to reveal the message, the lesson in the dream, and the message was hidden in the dream. So basically, Paro names Yosef Tzofnat Pa'aneach. It might be an Egyptian name, I don't know. It might be a foreign name, but it's definitely to take the name Yosef that was given to him by his parents, to change it to something that Paro named him. And in addition, ויתן לו את אסנת בת פוטיפרה כהן און לאישה. And then he also decided, Paro decided, to marry off Yosef. With whom? With Asnat. Who is this lady? That might be a different shiur, a different class, in a different time. So in a way, Paro made sure to change Yosef's name, to change his clothes, to give him power, and to marry him off to someone that he thinks can link him and connect him to the Egyptian society. Don't forget, Osnat bat Potifera Kohen On, meaning her father was one of the priests of Egypt, and to be a priest in Egypt is something that it's definitely governmental appointment, and also someone who is very connected to the government. So in a way, Paro is completing in what he has in mind, the transformation of Yosef the Hebrew to the Tzofnat Pa'aneach, the Egyptian. Did it work? Did Yosef go for it? Did Yosef change his personality and identity? Let's see what the Torah says. ויצא יוסף על ארץ מצרים. With everything that is going on here, I read with you 10 verses. And at the end, everything that Paro did in order to change Yosef's personality and Yosef's identity, it seems to be that Vayetze, meaning he left the palace. Who left the palace? Yosef. The same way that Yosef came into the palace, Yosef did not allow this kingly awards to affect him. And then the Torah continues. ויוסף בן 30 שנה בעומדו לפני פרעה מלך מצרים, and Yosef was 30 years old when he stood in front of Pharaoh. ויצא יוסף מלפני פרעה ויעבור בכל ארץ מצרים. And again, Yosef left Paro, and then he was traveling in all Egypt in order to know the country. There is something incredibly courageous in Yosef's behavior here. Yosef comes in front of Pharaoh as Yosef. He tells him the truth. I'm a Hebrew. God will help me to find the interpretation for your dreams. Paro is amazed by him, but he cannot. He cannot allow Yosef to remain Yosef. He gives him new clothing, appointment, changed his name, gave him a wife, connect him, link him to the Egyptian society, thinking that it will affect Yosef to, in a way, drop his old identity and to transform into this Egyptian king. And to our surprise, Yosef takes a step back and says, no, I'm Yosef. I remain Yosef. But take a look at the next psukim. וליוסף יולד שני בנים. Yosef had two children, בטרם תבוא שנת הרעב, before the years of famine came along. אשר ילדה לו אסנת בת פוטיפרה כהן און, that his wife had birth, she gave birth to two children. ויקרא יוסף את שם הבכור מנשה. Yosef named the first son מנשה. Why? כי נשני אלוקים את כל עמלי ואת כל בית אבי. Now, I will not translate yet the word nashani, because we will see it's a debate between the commentators, and I think it affects how Yosef saw himself. So we will wait with the translation, but we will say that he called him Menashe because God nashani, that we will explain in a few minutes, all my efforts and all my affliction and everything that I remember for my father's household. ואת שם השני קרא Ephraim, and the second child he called Ephraim, כי הפרני אלוקי, because God helped me to be wealthy and to be successful, בארץ עוני, in my land of suffering. Wait, what land of suffering? Does he refer to Egypt or to Israel? There was some suffering in Egypt too, but his success came in Egypt, not in Israel. So how can we explain the names that he gave to two of his children? Rabbi Sforno, from the 16th century in Italy, says, כי נשני אלוקים כעניין לעתיד, meaning it's like future tense, כאומרו, כי נשכחו הצרות הראשונות. So basically the Sforno suggested that if we go back to the pasuk, ויקרא יוסף את שם הבכור מנשה, so Yosef named the first son Menashe, why? כי נשני אלוקים את כל עמלי, which means all my success now and everything that I will have in my future will in a way erase for all the suffering that I had. In a way, if we pause here for a second, we see something interesting. Sforno suggests that Yosef had an internal conflict. He remembered the past, he remembered the cruelty from his brothers who threw him into the pit and then sold him, and then being a slave, and then being tempted by Potiphar's wife, and then being blamed for something that he didn't do, being thrown to the prison, being stuck in the prison for an additional 2 years. He remembered all of it. But now, when he lives the good life, he allows himself in a way to forget his past. So what we said before, that Yosef kept his identity, he might kept his identity, but he tried to run away from his past so he can enjoy the present and the future. Rabbi Yosef Bchor from France in the 13th century, he suggested a different aspect. Ki nashani, what does it mean, nashani? Hishkichani. Meaning, when Yosef's first child was born, he basically brought him forgetfulness. What do I mean by that? By having this child, he understood, that's it. I'm in a way done with my family. This child gives me roots here in Egypt. I'm second in command. I have children. I will have successors. I will have continuity. And this birth of my first son basically helped me to forget everything that I had until now, because it was like a cloud over my shoulders. The sadness, the bitterness that I had, now I'm done. I basically was able to erase my past and just concentrate on the future. So unlike Sforno that talks more about what Yosef was able to accumulate, according to the Bechor Shor, it's the birth of Manasseh. When Manasseh was born, Yosef understood, that's it. I'm done with my family. I'm done with my past. I'm looking only towards the future. The Ktav in Kabbalah suggested an additional aspect and an additional idea. And he says, Nashani, עניינו עזיבה שקודם שכחה, שבתחילה יסור ויעזיב הדבר מזיכרונו, ואחר כך תבוא שכחה. The Ktav in the Kabbalah suggested perhaps a psychological description of a process that someone needs to do in order to forget something, which means, he says Nashani is aziva. What does it mean, aziva? To let go. He says, to forget something, you need to go through two stages. The first stage is to remove it from your memory, actively, to take an event and to remove it from your memory. And then when you do it, you really forget about it. In a way, just imagine, Yosef was 17 years old when he was sold. He's now 30 years old. 13 years goes by, and his life was not exactly great. Yes, he was loved by his father, but he was hated by his brothers. Can you imagine your brothers throw you to the pit and then sell you? And then go to your father saying that, we don't know what's happened to him. And leave alone the brothers. What about the father? For 13 years, Yosef is in Egypt and he doesn't hear a word from his father. His father declared Yosef is dead, and that's it. No search mission to try to find him. No, nothing. Yosef is all alone. He's being sold as a slave. He's being tempted by his master's wife. He's being accused of something he didn't do, being thrown to prison. Even in prison, he's being forgotten. And now, he's second in command. No word from his family. All alone. People are trying to change his identity. He's trying to resist it and to be Yosef. But then he understands, I can continue to be Yosef. But I'm maybe not part of Yaakov family anymore. I need to build my future here. And actively, I need to remove, psychologically, I need to remove the memories for my family. And then I'll forget them. Manasseh, the firstborn son to Yosef, in a way allows Yosef to remove his family memory from his life experience. The Netziv focuses or emphasizes on the second part of this verse. Ki nashani Elokim et kol amali. God, basically with this birth of Manasseh, helped me to forget or to remove the memories of my past. Ve'et kol beit avi, and everything of my father's household. What does that mean? So the Netziv in העמק דבר says, הודה גם כן על שלא היה ליבו נרדף לבית אביו. He admitted that I have no desire now to go back home. This is, on one hand, incredibly courageous, but at the same time, a very sad commentary. Yosef, in a way, internalized that there is no way back. That's it. I'm all alone. I need to build my family. You know what? I don't have too much of a desire to go back home. It might reflect anger that Yosef had towards his family, not only for selling him, but maybe even more than that, not trying to find him. And if you really want to be someone who has some kind of a conspiracy, you might even suggest that when Yosef looked back, he says, 1 second, who was the one to send me to see how my brothers are doing? It was my own father. Yaakov was the one to send Yosef לראות את שלום אחיך, to see how your brother's doing. What? Yaakov didn't know that they hate me? Why did he send me there? Maybe Yaakov was involved as well? In a way, Yosef is stuck. He doesn't know what's going on. He does not know that the brothers told his father, here is Yosef's garment, it's all with blood, what do you think? And then Yaakov declares he's dead. He does not know that. So it's all about theories. And Yosef, in a way, realized, you know what? I have no desire to go back to a family like that. I'm done. לא היה ליבו נרדף לבית אביו. And then the Netziv continues. כי היה מתבלבל על ידי זה מלעשות הסקיו הגדולים. He says, I'll tell you why. Yosef basically removed himself from his family and he says, I'm not going back, A, because of his frustration with them, but also he understood that if he will continue to go back and forth, if he will continue to keep his desire to be with his family, he will not be able to what? To concentrate on what he needs to do on his mission. What was his mission? To save Egypt and probably the Middle East from 7 years of tremendous famine. He couldn't allow himself to be torn between family and business. You might say it may be lack of balance, but Yosef understood he is needed here. That's part of his dream. His first dream is to be the one who can sustain the Middle East, can sustain the world. He needs to do it. And to always have those feelings of maybe I need to go back home will not help him. שלא ישתדל באמת להודיע לאביו הוא משום שהיו החלומות אצלו כנבואה. ומוטל היה עליו שלא לגרום ביטולם ולא יהא ככובש את נבואתו. This is amazing interpretation. Says the Netziv, and you know why he didn't send a messenger to Yaakov, says to him, hey, I'm alive, come. Because Yosef was motivated by his dreams. He had 2 dreams. The first dream was to be someone who will sustain the world. He's doing it now. But the second dream is that the brothers and Yaakov will basically crown him as the king over Israel, the king of the family. And for that, he needs to wait. So according to the second part of the Netziv, Yosef is being portrayed here as someone who is tremendously motivated and dedicated and committed to his dreams. He will not allow a thing to cause him any deviations from his mission. His mission is to fulfill his dreams. Family out, his father out. It's all basically tunnel vision to one thing. I am going to lead not only the world, that's important, but even more important than that is I'm going to lead Yaakov's family. I'm going to be the chosen one. And for that, I'm willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to sacrifice my own personal life, not to send any messenger to my father to let him know that I'm okay, and I'm not going to go back to my family. This interpretation is complicated, because on one hand there is some, I will say, cruelty. I mean, tell your father that you are alive. Even though you don't know what the brothers said, you are attached to your father, you are connected to your father. You are the first son of his beloved wife, Rachel. How can you, for years, knowingly not sending anything to your father? It's hard to imagine something like that. But at the same time, you can have admiration to Yosef. He is so motivated by his dreams, and he knows that he needs to fulfill them, that nothing will stand in his way to accomplish them. That's the Netziv. Shadal, Rabbi Luzzatto from Italy, suggested a different look at Beit Avi, that when Yosef says that I'm going to forget my father's household. And what does that mean? ואת כל בית אבי, מה שעשו לי בית אבי, Meaning, I'm going to forget to some extent whatever was done to me in my father's household. ואין הכוונה ששכח ממש. It doesn't mean that he totally forget it. Why? כי הנושא על שפתיו זיכרון דבר מה, הנה לא שכח אותו. Because if he mentioned it, it means that he didn't forget it. It's like if you say to someone, you know what, I'm not upset with you with what you did to me on Wednesday, that you didn't tell me whatever. If you mentioned it, it's probably still important for you. So basically the Shadal says, Yosef didn't forget totally. החתם נתנני אלוקים במצב שלא ארגיש עוד ברעה אשר מצאתני בית אבי. כי במה נחשבת היא נגד הצלחתי וגדולתי. Basically Shadal says, you know why I am not that upset anymore? Because whatever they did to me, how can I compare it to the way I live my life now? With all the plenty and the wealth and the dignity and the honor and the glory and my position. When I compare it, it's not that important to me. I'm still upset, but it's not that important to me. When you analyze this interpretation, you see something very, we'll call it deep psychology of the human mind. Obviously, Yosef was hurt, not insulted, hurt to his core from the behavior of his brothers. Cruelty like that, from brothers to another brother, was something that, even for now, it's so hard to imagine. Yosef cannot forget it. Which, by the way, leads me to also believe that I'm not sure that Yosef really ever forgave his brothers for what he did to them, for what they did to him. It's hard. It was a very vivid memory in his mind. But there is some kind of a defense mechanism that Yosef reveals here. He says, you know what, I suffered. I went through a lot. But when I compare it to my life today, I will not allow it to ruin my success. My success is so great, my glory is so huge, that you know what? I'm not going to allow my brothers to ruin it for me one more time. That's it. I will force myself in a way to push it, to subdue those memories in order to allow me to enjoy my good fortune of today. Yosef is torn. Yosef's personality in a way is split between the past, his present, and the tremendous motivation that he has to fulfill his future, which will be via the dreams. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch from Germany tried to explain the word nashani with Manasseh in a different way. Nashani מבארים בדרך כלל כך, he says, the word nashani is being explained most of the time, says what? אלוקים השכיח ממני את כל צרתי ואת כל בית אבי. God enabled me to forget all my afflictions, all my sorrows, and everything from my father's household, which means clear memory. אך מי לא היה מזדעזע בקריאת משפט שכזה? רב שמשון רפאל here says, you need to shook to your core. How can you say such a sentence? What? God enabled Yosef to forget his past, to erase his past. יוסף קורא לבכורו שם המציין שאלוקים משכח ממנו את אביו הזקן ואת כל משפחת אביו. ביאור כזה יסביר מדוע לא התעניין יוסף כלל בגורל אביו במשך זמן כה ממושך, ובעל כורחנו נגיע למסקנה שיוסף היה פשוט אדם חסר לב. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch will not agree with my second interpretation with the Natziv. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says, no way. We cannot, we shouldn't, we must not explain or accept the interpretation that Yosef made a very cold calculation and says, you know what, God basically helped me to forget everything that they did to me, and now I need to focus only on the future, and therefore, even though I can tell my father that I'm alive, I'm not going to do it because I'm done with them. I need to concentrate on my future. He says, how can you even say something like that on Yosef? Because by saying that, you are describing a cruel, heartless person. Can't accept it, says Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. I can't accept it because when you look also at the future story, the first time that Yosef sees his brothers, he asks, how is my father doing? If you don't care about him, why would you ask? So obviously Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch will not agree with the Natziv, so he suggests a different thing. אבל לפי האמת, לשכוח אינו המשמעות היחידה של נשה. He says, nashani does not necessarily or only means to forget. נשה מציין גם היות בעל חוב. The word nasha or noshe, noshe is, in Hebrew, is if you have a lender and you have a borrower, so the malveh, the guy who gave the money, he's noshe in the person who borrowed the money. Noshe is to be a בעל חוב, is to owe something to someone. לפי זה, יהיה פירוש נשני, אלוקים הפך את אסוני ואת משפחתי להיות הנושים שלי. את מה שנראה לי עד כה כאסון וכהתעללות, הפך אלוקים להיות כלי שרת היוצר את אושרי, כך שמצאתי את עצמי חב חוב גדול לצרותיי למשפחתי. He basically turns everything upside down. He says, Yosef, now when his first son is being born, after he becomes second in command, he says to himself, Rega, let me pause. I had those dreams to sustain the world and then to be the king over my family. The only way to be able to sustain the world is for me to be in Egypt and then to rise somehow to become second in command. Without my family selling me here, I will not be here. In a way, I owe it to them. Now, you understand that it's a little hard to really understand it in the narrative itself, but it's a brilliant idea. Basically, Yosef now look at his past, not trying to remove himself from the past, not trying to run away from the past. He's not trying to deviate and to go astray from his past. No, exactly the opposite. He calls his firstborn son a name that links him back to his past. He feels that now he owes it to his family. Him becoming second in command and being able to fulfill his dreams, it's because of his family. Now, obviously, the questions and the challenges to this interpretation are pretty obvious. So you want to tell me that selling Yosef was not a sin, it was a mitzvah? You want to tell me that if God wanted Yosef to be second in command, he couldn't find a different way to do it? So I'm not going to go into the free will and God knowing and the problem that we have with selling Yosef. I'm trying to avoid those issues and try to concentrate only on his interpretation to the word nashani. Nashani, and he's correct, it's also from the word noshe, which means Yosef felt that he owes something. I would perhaps suggest that maybe Yosef felt it towards God, not necessarily towards his family, which means he understood that God has his own ways to bring him to where he needs to be. And perhaps God used the animosity from his brothers to bring it to fruition. So Rabbi Shimshon Raphael here suggested a very original idea, a bit problematic, but nevertheless brilliant. The Malbim says the following: Vaikra Yosef. So now he's talking about the second son, Ephraim. Vaikra Yosef mesaper tzidkat Yosef. So he's telling us how righteous Yosef was. שמן קריאת שמות בניו מבואר שעשה סימנים לעצמו שלא ישכח ימי עוניו בעת הטובה. Because Yosef named his children in a way that he will be a constant reminder for him not to forget his past. וזה דרך השתמים, שמטעם זה נצטווינו לאכול מצות ומרורים בליל שימורים, לזכר הגלות בעת החירות, כי הגלות סיבת החירות והרעה תביא את הטובה. The Malbim says, we are also have this obligation to remind ourselves, especially on Leil HaSeder, we still eat maror. We eat matzah, to remember that even though now we sit with plenty and wealth, you need to remember where you came from. So Yosef was concerned that his wealth and his position will basically make him a different person. Someone who is arrogant, someone who is pompous, and he didn't want it. So he had a constant reminder where he came from. And then he says, על כן קרא שם הבכור מנשה, כדואג על שנשא את עמלו ובית אביו ומצטער על זה. So he says, Menashe means to forget, but he is sorry that he needs to forget his family, that he needs to, in a way, disconnect from his family. He is sad that he cannot be with his family, so he always remembers his family. And then, Shema Sheni Kara Ephraim, and he called the second son Ephraim, Lehorot ki hifrau Hashem rak be'eretz onyo, that Hashem helped him to be successful where? In the land of his suffering, which is where? In Egypt. She'a'oni garam et gdulato, which means not that the land of Egypt was a land of poverty. No, that was the land of plenty for Yosef. But him starting as a poor fellow, that's what helped him to become a wealthy, very connected, very strong person in Egypt. Which means, according to the Malbim, the names of his children was a personal thing for Yosef, to always remember where he came from. So it's not so much about his family and his connections. It's about Yosef trying to keep his own identity and to create a constant reminder of where he came from and what is his mission. And the last one is Rabbi Yitzchak Dona Barbanel from the 15th century in Spain. And he says, הבן השני קרא אפרים, כי הפרני אלוקים בארץ עוני. He called his second son Ephraim because God gave him plenty in the land of his suffering, or the land of his poverty. שהיה קורא מצרים עם כל מעלתו, שמה ארץ עוניו. Says he called Egypt still his land of suffering. Why? להיות נפרד מאביו ומהארץ הקדושה. Because Yosef knew, that despite all the wealth and the plenty that he has in Egypt, that's not his place. His place is to be with his father and in the Holy Land, Eretz Israel, and not in Egypt. ולזה נזכר כאן הסיפור הזה אחרי סיפור התבואה, and this is why this story, the story of naming his children, is immediately after the fact that Yosef accumulated all the wealth and before the years of famine, להגיד, to teach you, שלא נשכח מבית אביו ומארץ מולדתו עם כל הגדולה והגבורה והתפארת שהיה לו, ועושר התבואה אשר בידו. This is a beautiful commentary on Yosef. Yosef knew who he was. He knows that all the plenty that he has, it's nice, it's wonderful lifestyle. But the most important thing in my life, says Yosef, I will give it all to be with my father and in the land. I will not allow the wealth that I have and the wealth that I enjoy to make me forget what is really important in life. So Yosef, definitely a very unique personality. He's being pulled and pushed to all different directions. People try to dictate to him who should he be. But he, with tremendous strength, finds somewhat a balance between his dreams, his desire to go back, to fulfill his dreams, his love for his father and the land, his understanding that he has a mission in Egypt, and to try to integrate them all and intertwine all those components into one. ויצא יוסף מלפני פרעה. The same Yosef that ended up in Egypt is the same Yosef that in few weeks will bring the family into Egypt to start to fulfill the covenant between the parts, and then the Geulat Mitzrayim. Thank you.